There it is. That's my older version. This is the 2-minute warning. If we can get everybody settled, we'll get started here. Okay, I think we got our technical difficulties worked out. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 61st Tennessee State House of Representatives District Debate tonight. My name is Derby Jones. I'm owner and publisher of the Williamson Herald. I want to welcome the crowd here tonight. We're pleased to co-sponsor this tonight along with Williamson, Inc., Williamson County Association of Realtors, WAKM AM 950 Radio, and WCTV Channel 3. The candidates joining us tonight are Republicans Bobby Hullett, Gino Bolso, Jeff Ford, Rebecca Burke, Terrence Smith, and Brandon Ogles, and Democrat Rebecca Purington. The candidates will get the opportunity to introduce themselves here shortly. The panelists asking questions tonight are Kerri Bartlett, managing editor of the Williamson Herald, Dave Crouch, Williamson Inc. liaison and moderator of the Williamson Inc. Monthly Town Hall Legislative Roundtable, and Bo Patton, Government Affairs Director for Williamson County Association of Realtors. I also want to recognize Creed Henderson and his staff at WCTV Channel 3 tonight who are putting this on TV for us. Before I introduce our moderator, I'd like to just a couple housekeeping notes. If you're tweeting, it's hashtag debate61. Hashtag debate61. Also would like to remind the audience if we would ask you all to be professional and refrain from shouting comments or questions during the debate, or you'll have to deal with Tom Lawrence after the meeting. So now to our moderator, the legendary Tom Lawrence of WAKM Radio, who will go over our debate format for us tonight. Mr. Tom Lawrence, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Derby. There's one rule. We will be out of here at 8 p.m. Second rule. See the man in the red socks on the front row, ladies and gentlemen? His name is Kel McDowell. He is the timekeeper. And when he says stop, we're moving on. Here are the rules. We have segment one of this event is today's entire event, a lot of planning has gone into it. This program will be divided into two parts. Part one will consist of a 60-minute debate with a question and answer session and time for rebuttal. Part two will consist of an approximately 30-minute lightning round with panelists asking candidates 2 questions each. Candidates will have 30 seconds or less to respond. Now, candidates will be given a question by one of the panelists here. He or she will be given 2 minutes to answer. Challengers will be given a 1-minute rebuttal, and then the original candidate will be given a 30-second wrap-up response. All of that will take 9 minutes. Let's meet the candidates in alphabetical order. And each one of you will have 1 minute to introduce yourself. B as in Bolso.
Many of you are no doubt asking yourself, Gino, why should I vote for you instead of one of these other very nice people? My answer is this. I share your conservative values, and I have a passion and ability to use those values to make this community better. Barry Goldwater defined a conservative as someone who applies the wisdom, experience, and revealed truth of the past to problems of the present. The past has taught us that strong communities require strong families. My wife, Kathy, and I of 32 years have lived in this community for 24 years. We raised all 5 of our children here. We know something about strong families. If elected, I will have a razor focus on making sure any legislation that comes through the General Assembly strengthens families so that our community is stronger and this country that we all love so much is stronger still. Thank you.
We've already had a violation of the rules. If you would, keep your seat, please. That's not Gino Bolso's fault. That's my fault. And we have that rule basically because there are TV cameras all over the place, and when you start jumping up, the cameras miss you. Rebecca Burke.
Thank you. I want to thank our sponsors tonight, Williamson, Inc., the Williamson County Realtors Association, WAKM, and the Williamson Herald. I really appreciate this. My name is Rebecca Burke. I'm 63 years old, born in Columbus, Ohio, but have lived here in Middle Tennessee for 33 years and am a voting resident of District 61 for 16 years. I'm the only candidate in this race that is a licensed and fully qualified teacher, having served Williamson County Schools for 7 years. Right now, there are no active teachers in the legislature, and I'd like to correct that. Before children, I had many achievements in the healthcare industry, so I'm coming to you with professional experience in 2 fields that together consume 80% of the state's budget. I look forward to talking with you all more during the debate or after. Thank you.
Jeff Ford.
I'd like to thank the sponsors tonight, and I'd like to thank this crowd for being here. It's really good to see so many people so engaged. I've been on the Williamson County Commission for a number of years. representing the east side of Brentwood, representing people in the 61st District for many, many years. Coming on to the County Commission, I really had one focus, and that was the schools. Now, being a county commissioner is not a requirement for being a state representative, but I think it served us well. The people like Charles Sargent who've come up through the county commission, the people like Rogers Anderson who've come up through the county commission and moved on to other places have served us well. Things are going very well here in Williamson County, and it's not by accident. It's by careful, determined leadership, and I want to represent you in the State House of Representatives to continue that consistent, determined leadership. Thank you, and I ask for your vote.
Bobby, pronounce your last name.
It is Hullett.
Hullett. Bobby Hullett.
Thanks, and I'd like to thank everybody for being here and all the sponsors as well, and I'm sure by the time we get to the end of the table, everybody will still be saying it, but I know that we speak for each other when we say thank you. My name is Bobby Hullett. I'm Robert Hullett on the ballot. I've lived here and actually lived in the same house since 1980 in District 61 the entire time. I've served this community in in several roles, whether it's a school volunteer, working on baseball fields. Brandon has experience in that as well. I'm also a licensed teacher. I also have a beginning administrator's license as well. So I've served you on the school board for 4.5 years. I was appointed to the county commission about 1.5 years ago. I've served there. So I would like to represent you in the state legislature because I will be the one candidate who is focused primarily on education, infrastructure, law enforcement, and the other points that are on my website and on my other pages are all accurate as well, but I am focused and laser focused on serving our kids, our families, and our communities in the educational realm. Thank you.
Brandon Ogles.
Okay. Everybody, thank you for being here as well, and I talk way slower than Bobby, so you'll definitely get all my words in. I grew up in the Grassland community. I'm the oldest of 6 children, and I have 4 children that are in Williamson County schools. I grew up seeing men serve in our community as baseball coaches and teachers, and I saw those same men serve later in our state and local government. So I've seen how service turns into leadership. I own a small business here in Franklin City. We're licensed in 35 states, so we travel all over the country doing work for some of America's biggest brands, and I've just noticed that Williamson County has some of the best dirt in America. This is a special place to live, and I just want to help protect our community and lead us into the future. Thank you very much.
Democrat Rebecca Purington.
Thank you, Williamson Herald and Williamson Inc. and WAKM and the Association of Realtors. I'm Rebecca Purington, and I live in a beautiful little hollow in the Hidden Valley neighborhood near Grassland. And my entire career has been focused on solving large-scale, complex problems. I basically just did that by building trust, building confidence in my customers, and building relationships. By trade, I worked in the aerospace and defense and intelligence community. And after 9/11, I started out launching rockets at Cape Canaveral. And then after 9/11, I formed my own company and provided first-of-a-kind voice communication systems to the intelligence community, to law enforcement and first responders, and to the defense community as a whole. What I want to do is bring that mindset of solving problems, building bridges, building trust with my constituents.
Sorry, ma'am.
Okay.
Terrence Smith.
My name is Terrence Smith, and I appreciate Tom the offer to be here, and appreciate all the sponsors. As you go through this, all these candidates here who are all qualified and all accomplished in one manner or another, you're going to be looking for 4 things to select that one candidate. You're going to be looking for connection, you're going to be looking for trust, you're going to look for honesty, and you're going to look for commitment to service. I'm a teaching physician at Vanderbilt University. I'm a 31-year soldier in the United States Army. I just completed my 5th combat tour a couple months ago. And I was a former state trooper. Every one of those positions requires attention to detail, commitment, and persistence. So as you go through the night, look for those 4 qualities. Try to find that connection, that trust, that honesty, and that commitment to service.
It's supposed to be 6:22 right now. It's 6:14, so we're doing well.
So I'll do some more.
It's time to start segment 1. Our first questioner, our first panelist is Dave Crouch, and he will ask his question or questions to Gino Bolso. Remember, you'll have 2 minutes to respond. Each other candidate will have 1 minute to rebut. Then we'll come back to you for a 30-second rebuttal. We're going to do this 7 times. Dave Crouch.
Thank you, Tom. Mr. Bolso, Governor Haslam has recently shared a letter that he intends to leave on the desk of his successor. In it, he says a lot of what's talked about during the campaign will not be issues that end up on your desk as governor. Your campaign ads indicate that one of your priorities is illegal immigration. And it seems that problem would probably be best addressed in Washington. And my question is, why did you choose to run for state representative, say, instead of running for the seat being vacated by Congressman Marsha Blackburn?
Well, for several reasons, Dave. First, with regard to the issue of immigration, that is an issue that is important to the voters of our district. It's one of the top 3 issues that is raised with voters when I canvass across the district door to door, and I've hit about 5,000 doors already. They want to know that you're going to support President Trump in his efforts to secure the border. And they ask the question just that way: do you support President Trump? My answer uniformly is yes. Sometimes they will say, I left the Republican Party because of President Trump. I'm not voting for you. Other times they'll say, I'm glad you said yes, because if you had said no, I was not going to vote for you. So immigration, regardless of what some may think, is an issue that's important to the voters, and it is manifested principally in the issue regarding in-state college tuition for illegal immigrants. Just 2 years ago, that issue failed in the House by just 1 vote. There are many in the state legislature who want to use tax dollars to subsidize college education for illegal immigrants. I've been very clear with the voters in our television ads, our radio ads, our mailings, that I am opposed, strongly opposed, to forcing taxpayers to subsidize the college cost of tuition for those here illegally. Those are issues, Dave, that are important to our voters. That's why I'm in the state legislature race. It's not a federal issue as to whether or not Tennessee provides in-state college tuition. It's a state issue. It's something I've been very clear on, and frankly, I think it's something that the voters of our district find to be significant.
Rebecca Burke, 1 minute.
Thank you, Gino. There's very little I can disagree with there. When it comes to Dreamers, which is a subject that's been discussed by Tennesseans, I'm concerned about Dreamers. I'm concerned about 64,000 Americans and their 250,000 plus family members who had dreams that will never be realized because they were killed by an illegal alien. Those are the Dreamers I'm worried about. We have a problem with employers providing employment for illegals, which makes it difficult for us to reduce the cost of our social services, and I hope my colleague Brandon Ogles will address employers employing illegals. Finally, sanctuary cities is a very important topic to Tennesseans, and it's related. While on my watch, we will never have sanctuary cities in the state of Tennessee. And I think every governor candidate that I've heard from feels the same way. Thank you.
Jeff Ford, 1 minute.
Thank you, Tom. Tom, Dave, when I listened to your question, I heard that illegal immigration was just a sample of one of the reasons why the question was to Mr. Bolso, why are you running for this office? So I took it as a larger question of why are you running, why did you select this office to run for? Moving up through the county commission, I'm prepared to serve as the 61st district representative. I would be perfectly happy if this were the last elected position I ever had. This position is not a consolation prize for me. It is not a stepping stone to anything else. It is something that I want to follow in the footsteps of Charles Sargent, who served us for 22 years. I believe serving long-term in a position like this allows you to move up into leadership and provides the best service for the people of Williamson County.
Bobby Hullett, 1 minute.
Thank you, Tom. I think something I need to say at the outset, it's tough when you have to balance the perspective of attacking when it's not attacking and giving the perspective of actual facts and truth about what we're doing here as we're campaigning and asking for your support and your vote. In relation to the question, if you go to an article that Brooke Wanzer wrote for the homepage, and there with Mr. Bolso, it says, if elected, Bolso plans to introduce a bill that would take legal action against the federal government for what he said is a failure to follow the 10th Amendment and bankrupting the country. That's saying that once he's elected, he would sue the federal government from Tennessee. I'm more concerned, as Jeff said, I came up from school board and then went to county commission. I'm more concerned with things that affect your family, your kids, your neighborhoods, and your neighbors, and how we can work better to fix our education system. I'm sure there's going to be a question about that a little bit later, but also with infrastructure and law enforcement.
Brandon Ogles.
Yes, I believe the state has voted twice and put bills in place twice to outlaw sanctuary cities across the state of Tennessee. I believe that first started in 2011, and then they did it last section, or the one before. So I think as far as at the state level, that's pretty much a done deal. We've decided that we're not going to tolerate that, and I believe everybody that's sitting up here tonight believes in law and order. To address one of the comments earlier, I own a small business, and we have to do go through a lot of steps to verify employers. We do I-9 in a system called E-Verify, and that's for everybody that ever gets a paycheck from our company. It's a rigorous vetting process, and my father, who works on that, is very much a Minuteman, and you have to get past him to get a check. But I will say, immigration and policy at the federal level and how we treat our neighbors are two different issues, and I do believe in treating people decently.
Rebecca Purington.
Okay, I was a part of that community. I probably have the distinction on this panel of someone who's sat with National Guard troops, setting up their comms plans while they were supplementing agencies at the border for days at a time. That is a national issue, and it's an important one. And I think if a person wants to address those issues, they should run for a higher office, because as the others have said, I think we need to focus on what's important to this district. And if people believe that that's the biggest problem that we have facing us right now, I just want to assure you that having spent time with Sheriff Ford, we are part of the Safe Communities process, which means that if someone is picked up and they're fingerprinted, they're referred over to the proper agencies. They're held and referred over. So there are processes in place. What Sheriff Long would like us to focus on are things like opioid addiction, school safety, victim notification, and mental health issues that he has to deal with people that he brings into his system. So I'd like to keep things focused on what matters to the people here.
Terrence Smith.
Well, it's been mentioned several times about sanctuary cities, and the fact is sanctuary cities reside in states. So it is a state issue, and at some level, the state legislature does have to at least talk about it. I mean, Arizona, for crying out loud, wasn't even allowed to enforce illegal alien laws as they relate to those. I mean, the federal government, has anybody ever thought there'd be a time when federal judges would tell federal law enforcement agents that they are not allowed to enforce federal laws. Is that not madness or what? I mean, that's ridiculous. So in terms of sanctuary cities, yeah, it falls back to a state issue. I realize overall it is a federal issue, though.
Kerri, Bartlett to Rebecca Burke, 2 minutes.
I think Mr. Bulso might have 30 seconds
that's right.
to respond.
See, you're dealing with an old man, Gino. You better watch him. Okay, Gino, you got 30 seconds, sir.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, the two biggest financial issues we have in our district right now is locating the funds necessary to provide additional infrastructure to relieve this traffic congestion that is making our community a less desirable place to be. We also need $400 million to build the schools to house and to educate the 20,000 students that are going to be joining our school system over the next 10 years. We pay enough in taxes. That is not the problem. The problem is too much of it is wasted in Washington. I've got a plan to deal with that. Mr. Hullett is correct. It involves the state of Tennessee bringing an action against the federal government under the 10th Amendment. It's discussed on our website. Please take a look there.
Now, Kerri Bartlett to Rebecca Burke.
Thank you. Yes. Ms. Burke, this question is about health care. With the structure of Medicaid being so uncertain throughout the nation, uninsured Tennesseans in poverty are more vulnerable than ever since Tennessee did not expand Medicaid or adopt the governor's Insured Tennessee plan a few years ago. Many remain without health care and without a safety net. Meanwhile, the state's TennCare program, which is also funded by Medicaid dollars, ensures low-income pregnant women, children, the disabled, and the elderly. But with that being said, would you support the expansion of Medicaid? And if not, do you have a plan to provide coverage or a safety net to those in poverty who remain uninsured?
Thank you for that question. We spend a great deal of money out of the state's budget on Medicaid, as well as receiving a lot of federal funding. I am not in favor of expanding the Medicaid program. What I am in favor of is the opportunity through a block grant system, which I'm holding out hope for, and there are several states that want to join together to push the federal government to release those funds to the states so we can innovate. You're sitting here in the middle of the most innovative healthcare community in the world. If we can't let loose that problem on entrepreneurs and create public-private partnerships that not only enhance the success of the Medicaid program, and when I say that, I mean that for all the money we're spending on Medicaid, our disease statistics are near the bottom of the United States for several chronic diseases, diabetes, heart disease, obesity. I think we've got the minds here in this community that can truly innovate and do it in such a way that our costs are capped. And the program doesn't grow to the point where it's not affordable, but we're able to reach out to the working poor. Remember the incentives that we create here. Medicaid is socialism. What I'm proposing is private enterprise helping us to cure a long-standing problem. Part of that would be work requirements for your benefits. Part of that would be cost sharing. No matter how low you are in income level, you should be paying a few dollars for every doctor visit. And I would propose an idea like Senator Mark Green tried to advance through the Senate, where those individuals would carry a debit card that would be loaded once a year, and they would have health care incentives and benchmarks they'd have to meet to take care of their health in the primary care arena, rather than ending up in our emergency rooms, which costs all of us much more money.
Jeff Forward, 60 seconds.
Thank you for the question, Kerri. I am not in favor of expanding Medicare. I'm not in favor of enhancing Medicaid, I'm sorry. I'm not in favor of expanding or enhancing either one of those federal programs. What I am in favor of is making sure that people have good jobs, making sure that they can get their health care through the their employer, like over 90% of the people in the 61st district already get their health care. Our economy is doing great. Let's incent people to get those good jobs, make sure that they are covered with health insurance through their employer, and then we will not have to expand the Medicaid program. It involves roads in our rural communities. It involves broadband in our rural communities, and making sure that we can attract good jobs into those communities so those people can have the health care that they deserve.
Bobby Hullett, 1 minute.
Thanks. This is going to come as a shock, and I hope that there's more of this throughout the entire night, but that you should hear from your candidates in front of you. But I do not entirely disagree with what Rebecca said or with what Jeff said. And the thing is, there are a lot of valid points in that. The terminology is what we're talking about here, is when we say expand. No one, I doubt you would hear anyone here say that we would want to expand it. What we need to do is modify it. And Rebecca has a lot of good points. To add on to Jeff's point about the good jobs, we also need to look at low-income housing options as well, because if you look at our bus drivers that we try to hire for Williamson County schools, they're not going, if they can't live here, they're not going to drive 50 or 60 miles from Clarksville or Robertson County or wherever they might live to come here and work. It's a zero-sum game for them, because they'll spend all their money that they might make here more in salary or in pay in gas and time and everything on the road. So we need to look at all of those options that affect all of the folks who also depend on Medicaid as well.
Brandon Ogles.
I'm going to kind of agree with everybody so far as well, that those were all good points. And I'd like to speak of something more that, I have private insurance, and my rates in the last 6 years have gone from roughly $550 to close to $1,200. And I'm not a professional in the medical community, and I don't understand all the ins and outs of all the government programs, but I know as a small business owner, I've seen rates skyrocket. And insurance is one of those things that nobody really wants to pay for until you need it, and I realize that. But I do think there need to be some really innovative minds going to work to look at the somewhat of a crisis we have with the cost and all the systems across the board. It seems it's not getting better. There's been lots of changes, and it seems like every couple cycles we have a rebuilding process. So I have a concern with those issues.
Rebecca Purington.
Thank you. I believe that there's a connection between health and prosperity. And someone reminded me the other day that when I was an executive at Lockheed Martin, which is the largest defense prime in the world, that as an executive, I had to go and get a physical every year. And that was not something, that was no government requirement or any mandate that they were following. That was because they realized that for me to be productive, I needed to be healthy. And we have a lot of unhealthy people here in Tennessee. It's easy to forget when 95% of our residents have health insurance. But if you look at the statistics for diabetes and other treatable diseases, we're ranked very high. So I think that people need to have access to affordable health care. And when you talk about expanding Medicaid, what you're really saying or refusing to is that you are going to reject what is now about $4 billion that would have come into Tennessee that instead of coming to our state is going to other states. So I do believe that we need to provide better health care to our state.
Terrence Smith.
Well, there's not $4 billion just sitting around on a table somewhere. That is national debt that we are going to pass on to our children, and somebody's going to have to pay for that, okay? Obamacare is not funded. We're ramping up the national debt to pay for this thing. Now, I don't agree with Medicaid expansion, but I'm also a physician, and I'm where the rubber meets the road at our hospital. I treat the patients who don't have insurance, and my heart goes out to them. It really does. But I think we need to keep an open mind with the Trump administration over the next few years, because I think they're going to change things. I think they're going to open up interstate insurance trade so that we can get more affordable options. And I do think we need to keep everything on the table. I don't think we need to sit here and etch it in stone. We'll never, ever expand Medicaid and will never, ever take federal dollars for this. I think we need to keep an open mind on that.
Gino Bulso.
You know, Kerri, when you refer to Medicaid expansion, another way of characterizing that is expanding the role of government in healthcare. And our principal problem in the healthcare industry and in the healthcare insurance industry is not the quality of care. We have many, many qualified doctors, nurses, health professionals. The problem is the cost, the affordability of it. And can you give me any historical examples where the government, the federal government, has gotten involved in an industry and costs have gone down? I think it would be difficult. In fact, just the opposite occurs. Where government moves in and squeezes out the private sector, costs and inefficiency invariably go up. So the answer here is not more government. The answer is less government, less regulation. We need to have good health care insurance available for everyone, especially the poor. But more government is not the answer.
Rebecca Burke, 30 seconds.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate my colleagues' comments, and it shows that we're thinking about the same issue. This is where the dirt hits, your feet hit the road in terms of county commissioners not being ready to make the jump to the state legislature. Suddenly, you have to be concerned about what's going on in the entire state. It's not just Williamson County. We have 10 rural hospitals who have closed because the local people don't have any form of insurance and can't afford to pay a hospital bill. These are what we call working poor. They're doing exactly what we want them to do. They're working, but they make too much to qualify for any assistance. I think we get the federal government out of it with a block grant, let entrepreneurs go loose, and provide better care.
Bo Patton from the Williamson County Association of Realtors.
Thank you, Tom. Good evening. Thank you to our candidates for being here. This is going to go to Jeff. We're going to start with you. It's about state and local governments working together. Oftentimes we see the General Assembly take up legislation that appears to be more local issues in nature. For example, a bill that some say was aimed at Williamson County, referred to as the Building Design Elements Bill, it was House Bill 476, would have taken away authority from local zoning governing bodies. Now, thankfully, that bill was withdrawn this year, and the sponsor of it's not seeking re-election. But however, on the other hand, we've seen instances like in Nashville, for example, where the Metro Council passed a bill that some say went too far regulating short-term rentals and Airbnbs. And the General Assembly took that matter up and passed their short-term rental bill. In your opinion, where is the line drawn between local and state control over some of these issues?
Bo, thank you for the question. We do on the County Commission, we pass resolutions and we go and we ask our state legislature to take up certain issues. When I'm in the state legislature, I will give great credence to those resolutions that come from our county commission, who does a great job, from our school boards, who do a great job, from our city aldermen, from our city commissioners. I'll give great credence to those elected bodies. Those bodies are closest to the people, and they know best. The state of Tennessee does not need to get into the business of telling Williamson County how to run Williamson County. We know how to do that here. Our elected officials are doing a great job, and so I would have the ultimate respect for them. Where I draw the line is when some of our cities begin to do things that are against federal law, begin to ignore certain laws, when they are not enforcing federal laws from an immigration standpoint, when they're not enforcing state laws, that's where I draw the line. That's where we then have to have state regulations come in and make sure that the laws are being followed. So I don't think that the state needs to get into the design. What kind of city do we want to have? That's up to us. What kind of county do we want to have? That's up to us. That's not up to Nashville. And so when I'm up there, I will represent our local governments, just as Charles Sargent has, represent those, take those issues to the state legislatures and advocate on our behalf and make sure and work with our state legislators to get those things done. And how you get those things done is through relationships. If I've learned anything on my time on the county commission, it's that it's relationships that matter in these. And so in addition to some of the things you've been told to ask for. Look for people who can build relationships with other people and other legislators. Thank you.
Bobby Hullett, 1 minute.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks for the question as well. So the one thing we have to keep in mind is that our school board, our county commission has worked tirelessly and with great efforts to pass the High Performing Schools Act by sending resolutions to our state legislature who took that there. The one thing we have to stay away from, and I think this might have been where the question was going, is you can't go into the state legislature representing only your local community with an axe to grind. You can't go up there and say, we're going to make this community or this county or this city, this municipality pay for whatever grievance I think that I've got against them. You can't do that. You have to go in with a collaborative and cooperative attitude, which I have, which you can't talk about. I've heard a lot recently over the last month or so about what candidates can't do, what they won't be able to get the votes for. I'm the person who can go up there and get the votes for this. I started in 2012 with the passing of the initiative to get the performing arts centers in all of our middle and high schools. That was the very first thing I did. So send someone to the state house like me who can be collaborative and cooperative with all leaders in the house.
Brandon Ogles.
Yes, this local control is used a lot, and sometimes I get a little cross with hearing that, because sometimes it seems when the state mandates something or they require something, but yet they don't want to take any accountability, they throw in local control. I see a lot of mandates put on our teachers as far as teaching requirements for our students, but yet the testing system is implemented by the state. And then there's circumstances where the state is required to provide funding, but yet they don't do enough to fully fund the initiatives they mandated. So I think we have to be careful with the local control. I'm a local guy. I like our county government to have the word, but when a mandate is put in place, I do think the state needs to step up and take the initiative and have the accountability to see things through.
Rebecca Purington.
I would just say that it's kind of interesting to me to see that the state government is trying to get involved in what should be local decisions. They don't like when Washington does that to Tennessee, but sometimes they're comfortable with mandating things here for our local community. One thing that I'm struck by is how well this area is managed, whether you're talking to Mayor Anderson or the sheriff or many of the people that work here in our community. They do an excellent job, and I really have no concerns about how they would manage this community, and I think we have much larger problems that need to be tackled.
Dr. Smith.
I agree. That was very well said, by the way. I think in general, we do need to defer to the local communities. Nobody knows that local community better than the people that live there. Nobody knows it better than the representatives that are representing those city councils and those county commissions. So we should, at the state level, defer to local governments as much as possible, unless, as Mr. Ford said, that they're doing something against state law or federal law that is inappropriate, such as a sanctuary city. But other than that, we really should defer to the local communities, the people that live there, to make those decisions.
Gino Bolso.
Bo, it's a great question. And it illustrates why we need more conservatives in the state legislature. Because local governments should be left alone to do what they're competent to do. Because the government that is closest to the people is the one that is most responsive to the people, and that's where their responsibility should be. I mean, that principle is actually embodied in our Constitution, in the 10th Amendment, which provides that any power not delegated to the federal government is reserved to the states. It recognizes that the federal government shouldn't do anything that the states cannot do as well. That's one of the big problems we have right now, is that our federal government is too big. It's trying to do too much. It's taken too much power away from the states, and it's time for the states to remind the federal government what the Constitution says. We need people in the state legislature that understand the Constitution and have the background, education, and experience to bring appropriate actions against the federal government to make sure Tennessee's rights are protected.
Rebecca Burke.
Many business leaders have said to me what they expect of the state government is to get out of my way. That's what I think we should be doing. We should push down as much control to the localities, as my colleagues have said. A perfect example are unfunded mandates on our schools. I'm a proponent of exemptions for high-performing school districts so that they can operate without the oversight of the Department of Education in Tennessee. So if we want to have 32 children in the classroom instead of 31, we can do it, and we can innovate without them breathing down our backs, because we have the model here for the rest of the state.
Jeff Ford, 30 seconds.
Thank you. I appreciate the support from all of my fellow candidates, and I ask each and every one of you for your vote on August the 2nd. So I don't really feel a need to yes, ma'am, I would love for you to vote. I would like to say that Charles Sargent has been the representative in our Williamson County delegation who has worked most closely with our cities, counties, and that's what we're going to be missing with Charles leaving the legislature. And so that's where we need someone who understands and fully respects the local control of those bodies. Thank you.
Dave Crouch to Bobby Hullett.
Mr. Hullett, appropriately asking you an education question, which you've already alluded to, but feedback from our current state legislative delegation indicates that it would be very difficult to get the votes in the state legislature to change the BEP formula to improve Williamson County's share of state funding. So assuming we can't get the BEP formula changed, how would you propose to help the state fund our the construction of new schools in Williamson County?
Thank you, Dave, for the question. Actually, I can get it changed. I'm the one person who will sit up here and tell you that when elected, I will get it changed, and it will be a cooperative and collaborative effort. Here's the thing. In 2012, I was elected to the school board, and when I came on, I met with Mike, Dr. Looney, and I sat down, and he said we had this initiative. One of the things I ran on in 2012, the Campbell Center at Brentwood High School, which I was actually the first performer as a senior in high school to perform in, was dismantled. It was turned into an auxiliary gym. So the kids there in fine arts, and I support all the fine arts kids. I'm a former band director and baseball coach. All the kids who were there were going to go through their entire high school career and not have a venue of their own to perform in. And I said, well, we need to get this done. I was elected and went in, and I told Mike, I said, we're going to do this, and he agreed, and he said, well, we have to do it structured. I said, no, let's do them all at once. And he said, well, we can't do that. And I said, why? And he said, because we just can't. It's the way it's always been. And I told him, I said, the enemy of progress is the way we've always done things. And so I said, here's the difference. We're going to go and we're going to tell them we want to do them all at one time. He said, what makes you think that it'll be any different now? And I said, because I'm on the board. And you know what? In October of that year, the county commission voted, some voted against, but it passed with a majority. And right now, at the end of this year, every middle school and high school in our county will have a performing arts center. And that was something I championed and supported and followed the entire time. And I went out and I talked to county commissioners to get their votes. So here's what will happen. What everybody thinks is if we re-engineer and basically dismantle the BEP and recreate it, it's not going to take away from the counties that it currently gives to. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to restructure the formula, restructure where it comes from. We have a $2 billion surplus. Why is that not being used on education and infrastructure? Infrastructure is not traffic, by the way. Traffic is a byproduct of failed infrastructure. We need to get to that as well. But why are we so afraid to say it's not a destination, it's a tool? That's what we should be using it for. So when we get there, and you come with me, when we get there, I can make that happen because I can work collaboratively and cooperatively, with the other state leaders to make sure that all of our kids, all of our families, all of our neighbors, all of our communities, and all of our schools benefit from a new funding mechanism. Thanks.
Brandon Ogles, 1 minute.
Well, I have a great deal of respect for Bobby, but I'll disagree with him on this simply because I've been hearing about this for the last 3 years on the Hill. I've got a lot of friends in rural districts, and in any given day, if given the chance, I think the delegation from Williamson County may get tarred and feathered because we have so much here. Though a lot of those rural districts simply believe that we have more because we get more from the state, and that's just not the case. Williamson County is shortchanged on the funding, but I truly believe if this goes to the floor, and there's an adjustment made on the floor of the BEP, we'll actually come away with less. And the votes seem to be at about a 70-30 split. This is not close. It's not anywhere close. So the funding for Williamson County for our schools and growth needs to come outside the BEP formula. I think if you touch it at this point, you're only going to hurt Williamson County. There needs to be other initiatives that are proposed for high growth districts that come outside the BEP.
Rebecca Purington.
I would just say that I agree with Brandon on much of what he said, that if you listen to Representative Sargent, he will tell you that you better be careful what you ask for, because if they start re-engineering that BEP, we may actually get less. But I just want to throw some numbers out there to give you a picture of where we stand in Tennessee in education. We are 47th in per pupil spending across the state. Williamson County spends about $600 less a year than the state average. We need to invest more in education in Williamson County and across the state. And I've been hearing since I moved here about how we needed to increase funding. And I was told how wonderful the schools were when I moved here, and that conversation is starting to change because of the overcrowding. Teachers are moving away. We're losing our quality of schools. So I think we need to invest more in education. It's why we have the wonderful community that we have today, because of that investment.
Terrence Smith.
Well, I think that what you're seeing on the BEP is the means testing of the children here in Williamson County, the means testing of the parents of those children here in Williamson County. And I think we need to go to the state legislature and have them explain that. I mean, the BEP, I'm going to read one sentence from the BEP. Equity adjustments, cost of operations adjustments, and physical capacity adjustments equalize responsibility among the local school systems based on variations in the cost of delivering services to students and in relative physical capacity. Now, can anybody tell me what that means? Nobody can tell me what that means, because you don't understand it. And unless you understand it, you will not have transparency in the BEP. And unless you have transparency in the BEP, you will not get equity.
Gino Bolso.
I'll disagree gently with Rebecca. I don't believe that our school system here in Williamson County is the top-notch quality that it is because of the money that's been invested. I think it's because of the families. We have great teachers. We have great administration, of course, across the board. But what really sets Williamson County apart is that it has great families, families who take an interest in their children's education. And frankly, I think we need to work towards a funding mechanism that maximizes the extent to which parents can be involved in education decisions for their children. And although it may be something of a difficult battle in the General Assembly, it is one worth fighting, because right now Williamson County itself is being harmed to the tune of tens of millions of dollars every year under this BEP formula. We need a 21st century formula that allows each child in Tennessee the same amount for that child's education, whether that child is in Sullivan County, Williamson County, or Shelby County.
Rebecca Burke.
Thank you. Bobby, I've got to be a little critical here. You've been on the school board for 6 years and the county commission a little over 1, and you haven't achieved any progress on the school funding formula. So why should we believe that you're going to be able to do that when you get to the state legislature? The formula is 25 years old. It was written before we even had computers in the school. I've advocated since I declared I was running for this office last September that we need a new outcomes-based formula. It's not just to benefit Williamson County. That's what they're saying in the educational field. Dr. Marguerite Rosa from Georgetown is the foremost expert on school funding, and she's helping several states right now to revamp their formulas to an outcome-based formula. And guess what? The outcome is, what does it cost to educate a student who can perform well? We are the model for that formula. Right now, with the Every Student Succeeds Act, which is somewhat new, we will for the first time be accumulating statistics on what does it cost us to produce a good student at Brentwood High, at Ravenwood High. Right now, we don't even know.
Jeff Ford.
When you talk about reopening the BEP, that's a very dangerous situation. We have to remember the origin of the BEP. It came out of a lawsuit that was filed by the small schools back 25 years ago. And I'm not wanting to go and put Tennessee at the risk of litigation and for the small schools versus the large schools again. That doesn't do anything good for our schools. That being said, there are plenty of ways that we can enhance funding from our state legislature so they can come into schools. Pilot programs, public-private partnerships that can reward schools, like Ms. Burke said, reward schools for the performance. And guess what? We're performing very well here. But there's also ways that we can loosen up the strings on Williamson County. The cost of compliance with the state legislature, with the rules that are put in by the Department of Education, is about 2%. From my talks with school board members, about 2% of our budget is spent on complying with state regulations. If we roll those back, we can put that money into the classroom.
Mr. Hullett, 30 seconds.
Thank you, Tom. I hope you're listening very closely. Terrence, I understand exactly what it is. It means that every dollar we send to Nashville, we get 60 cents back on it. If you think that's fair, then you elect one of the folks sitting here that's not me. We get 60 cents back on the dollar that we send. Becky, or Rebecca, sorry, the reason that I haven't achieved anything is we don't control it at the local level. It is controlled at the state level. I can't do anything as a school board member or a county commissioner about the BEP. It is controlled there. Mr. Bolso said that his comments sounded like he was pro-school choice, which is vouchers and charter schools, which I'm against. So if you're concerned about education, this debate can end right now because you can either elect someone who can't do something or the one person up here who will get something done.
Kerri Bartlett to Brandon Ogles.
Mr. Ogles, we'll let him get a mic. In your campaign literature, you focus on a plan to expand Williamson County's Student Resource Officer program across the entire state. Currently, Williamson County provides an SRO in every county school, and the county commission and the sheriff leadership worked really hard on that. But you say that almost half of the state schools are still without one. However, some legislators balked at the idea of expanding an SRO to every school in the state earlier this year because of the high cost to implement such a program. How would you find funding for this program, and how would it help Williamson County?
Okay. Yes. And Williamson County has pretty much the model program statewide to look at for the SRO program. We've actually got 2 officers in every high school, I do believe, and we've got a security officer in every school in the county, which is a very expensive initiative. It's taken a lot of time, and it's really a program that Williamson County has been on the forefront statewide in developing. As far as how you would pay for that statewide, I got a letter from the state this week that I requested on some funding that's coming up next year. There's about $200 million that wasn't projected that we'll have available, and that's not money that anybody's allocated for anything. And I hope the governor will take on the initiative to put a school safety officer in every school across Tennessee, and that'll be part of his budget. And if it's not, I think a good portion of that money, that $200 million, should be allocated to school safety. And that simply comes as a parent, and we've knocked on a lot of doors across the county. And there was a poll done 2 weeks ago of voters like you in this county, and they were asked the question, do you think this is an important enough initiative to expand statewide? And over 90% of the residents in Williamson County in this district said yes. And I don't know if y'all look at polling much, but there's not many things that poll over 90%. Air and food is about the only thing that I can think of. So this is an important initiative. It's very expensive. It's controversial because it's a controversial issue, and we're all heartbroken that we have to deal with it.
Rebecca Purington.
I fully support making sure that we have an SRO in every school. When I worked for Lockheed Martin, I worked at a facility right down the street from Columbine when the massacre happened there. And when I was working on voice communication systems, I often talked with school administrators who were building out communication systems designed to protect teachers or for them to inform law enforcement that when there was an active shooter situation. Even working with warfighters for 30 years, those are the most haunting communications that I've ever had with a customer, to have all of those scenarios played out. And I think that it's absolutely critical that we have, if not just one, probably two would be more effective, but I know that would be terribly expensive. But we need to move forward very rapidly with getting SROs in every single school in Tennessee.
Terrence Smith.
This is an issue I really can't disagree on. It is expensive, but I think it involves the safety of our children. And as a parent and a former state trooper, I can't disagree with making our schools as safe as they possibly can be. I mean, nothing is 100%, but having a police officer there day to day is a step in the right direction.
Gino Bulso.
Kerri, I agree with Terrence that we need to do everything that we possibly can do to ensure the safety of our children at school. There is no higher priority in this country than making sure that kids come home from school safely. And so I'd like to advance the discussion just a little bit. Of course, we should have an SRO at every school. But is that going far enough? You know, there are proposals, and I noticed that in one of Brandon's mailings, he called, I think, the proposals reckless and irresponsible or something of that nature, but proposals to allow qualified teachers who are trained in arms to bring with them to school, if they want to, guns that would allow in an active shooter situation more than just the SRO to be present to deactivate the shooter. And I'd like to hear from Mr. Ogles as to whether he is opposed to teachers who voluntarily want to bring arms to school to protect children should be allowed to do that.
Rebecca Burke.
MTSU just did a poll after the Parkland tragedy. 50% of Tennesseans now support highly trained teachers with weapons in schools. For me, I think we have a lot of teachers who are retired military and law enforcement that are expert marksmen that I think we could begin with and compensate them dually for the extra training it would require. SROs alone will not solve it. We need capital changes to school buildings. The average age of our school buildings across the state is 40 years old. They're at the end of their useful life. The figure that Brandon mentioned I don't think is accurate. He said 200 million. The governor has already approved, and it's in the budget, 30 million for SRO officers across the state in every school. Where there's a figure difference here, we have a potential of $450 million coming into the state from the collection of online sales tax that the Supreme Court has just said we can collect. My idea is that half of that would go to schools' capital costs, including safety. The other half would go into our rainy day fund and the Medicaid reserves, because we're due for another recession after 9 years of economic expansion.
Jeff Ford.
First of all, when I see a mailer that says there's only one person in this race that is concerned about school safety in the 61st District, I'm offended. I think that you see that there are every candidate here on this stage is concerned about school safety. That mailer hit mailboxes the day of a county commission meeting. I had county commissioners walk up to me and say, we spend $2 million a year on school safety, putting school resource officers in every school in Williamson County. We not only put them into the Williamson County schools that we have responsibility for, but our sheriff's department pays for those in Franklin Special School District. We don't have any say-so or any responsibility for that, but because we care about school safety, we do. So if someone says that no one else in District 61 cares about school safety, I am personally offended.
Bobby Hullett.
Thank you, Tom. You know, personally, I'm against teachers with guns, and I'll just tell you why. No matter how well trained they are, if a teacher makes a mistake and kills another teacher, kills another child, something that's not the shooter, we're in a whole different ballgame at that point. It is no longer post-Columbine, post-anything. It's post-something brand new that we will never get away from. So does the discussion need to be had? Sure. One of the things when several years ago when the school board brought it to the county commission to put SROs in every school, there was one county commissioner who voted against it. And I asked my predecessor, the late Tom Bain, I said, you know, what do you think he was thinking? And he said he's thinking he doesn't want to be on county commission anymore. It's true. It's a joke, but he was correct. The thing is, the SROs, there's a little bit of inexperience up here when we're talking about how things are getting paid for. We already pay for SROs in all of our county. If we put SROs across the state, Williamson County tax dollars are going to be funding, just like the BEP are going to be funding initiatives across the state for kids that aren't our own. I have a plan to secure every classroom in this state and have it sponsored and funded by corporate dollars, not your tax dollars. I'm the guy for education if you want to send somebody to the state for that.
Mr. Ogles, 30 seconds.
Yes, the $200 million I spoke of is the portion of that internet sales tax that's coming from vendors outside the state of Tennessee. So it would be money from outside of Tennessee being used to fund the SRO program. And if you're offended on the program, it's probably because you tried to stir up a lot of trouble and say that I was out of touch and that that's not something that voters wanted, is to fund SRO statewide. And for some reason, I guess the polling resonated with you. But it's a good program. It needs to be funded. It needs to be funded statewide. I don't think any money is going to be taken from Williamson County to do this.
Bo Patton to Rebecca Purington.
Shifting gears a little from education, let's talk about, I guess, a hot topic in Middle Tennessee and traffic and growth. I'm sure everybody was affected by that a little bit this evening, but with estimates being anywhere from 90 to 100 new people a day moving into Nashville, depending on what entity you want to believe on that. This historic growth is, of course, having an impact on the whole region, not just Nashville and Davidson County. They're moving here for our quality of life. You know, we've got a great college in Rutherford County. I mean, the whole area has a draw. And, recently, WCAR in April commissioned a poll by American Strategies. We surveyed 400 likely voters in the May elections. And Brandon, you talked about you rarely see a poll with 90%, but 91% of the respondents said they would be much more likely to vote for a county commission candidate, because that's what we polled at the time, who would address traffic and congestion issues affecting our area. With the failed Nashville transit referendum that several say, including Commissioner Schroer, that was not the answer, what role should or can the state play in addressing this issue affecting this whole region, and how would you take the lead on that?
I think one of the big problems was that was not addressed regionally. And I know, so basically it was Davidson County working on that and not really getting the surrounding communities as involved as they should have been. It's going to be some time before that's going to come up again. And the traffic, everyone knows, is not getting any better. So I think some things that we can do is work with private industry to create situations where people are going to work at different times. So maybe offering more flexible times to go to work and come home in the evening. I understand that in Tennessee, the priority has to be on safety. But I also appreciated the fact that on the Improve Act, that was a bipartisan effort where we were able to get those priority projects taken care of. So there was definitely a benefit to that, and I'd like to see more efforts like that one. But it's going to be a challenge, and I would like to see us work on a regional basis. And from what I understand, there are some obstacles to us working regionally, and it has to be done on a county-by-county basis, which makes it very difficult to get a solution through. So I think my answer is to work regionally and make sure that there are no barriers at the state level to communities doing that.
Dr. Smith.
That's another good answer. I like sitting next to you, by the way. No, she's absolutely right. It has to be regional. It must be reasonable. Because, I mean, look at what we can do now. You've got 840 that's not finished north of town. If we finished 840 and fully developed that outer belt, look how much traffic on 40 would be pushed to that area. That would relieve traffic in downtown Nashville. So let's take, for example, using, there's an idea here that I have about using and improving the shoulder, the berm lane. If we could improve that to allow traffic at peak flow times in and out of Nashville, we will, in short order and at minimal, well, not minimal, but at a reduced cost, have another lane available fairly quick. And of course, you've got to make some emergency egress lanes, but that's another option that's there. And I think you have to think outside the box when it comes to traffic management. We've got new things, innovations, we've got driverless cars and so forth on the horizon, and we don't know what those new things will bring to the future as well.
Gino Bolsa.
Traffic has been one of the key issues that we've been focused on for this entire campaign. And it is something, of course, that requires cooperation of governments at all levels, local, state, and federal. It involves improvements to county roads, state roads, and interstate highways. And it is absolutely the case that there has to be a regional solution to this. Obviously, there's not going to be a time in the future when you can have traffic in Davidson County somehow just miraculously ease through Williamson County and then hit traffic again in Murray County. That's not the way this is going to happen. The way to ease traffic congestion in Williamson County is to address congestion both in Williamson County and in the neighboring areas. One thing that is important to understand, however, is that when you're talking about bringing together local, state, and federal authorities, that requires enormous amounts of background, education, and experience of both the U.S. Constitution, the state constitution, and local ordinances so that all these governments can work together in a constitutional effort to relieve the traffic congestion.
Tom, I'm jumping back to SROs. We're not done yet.
It's your time.
Okay. Just a couple more comments I'd like to make. Bobby referred to the $2 billion surplus last year. It's gone. I've talked with the finance department at the state. It's packed into the budget already. You can't extract it. Our surplus this year is only $250,000. So that's wishful thinking that we'll have money there to do anything for school safety. Want to go back and look at, well, let me approach it this way. I was with a kindergarten class the day of Sandy Hook. I was with 5th graders the day of Parkland. Bobby, you were nowhere around unless you were being censured by the school board chairman for losing your temper one too many times. I really don't take to someone whose ego is so huge to sit here and say you're the only one that understands education because you don't even have a good handle on the statistics. And by the way, you're not a licensed teacher. That license lapsed 3 years ago.
Jeff Ford.
How's everybody doing out there? You guys having fun? I'd like to jump back to traffic if I might. The one thing that hasn't been talked about is how long it takes to build a road in Tennessee. From the time that a road project gets onto the list until the time it is built can be up to 8 years. That's too long. We don't know where the traffic is going to be in 8 years. We need to be able to cut some of the red tape, be able to build those roads faster, be able to get through the process quicker to be able to get the roads we need. Look, how long have we been talking about Mac Hatcher? Alderman Berger's here. How long have we been talking about that? Forever. We need to get those roads quicker, and we need to get them done right.
Robert Hullett.
Thank you, sir. Well, it's funny when we talk about temperament and that kind of demeanor. So I'm going to skip past that and get to the traffic part of this. I got here right at game time tonight because I was caught in infrastructure. And get your cameras ready, because if you're ready, what I'm holding in my hand is well over $100,000 of information that's gone out to mailboxes. $100,000. I don't have that kind of, I'm not independently wealthy. I'm married to a school teacher. I'm a former school teacher. I don't have that kind of money, but you're still looking at well over $100,000 of vagary, misinformation, half-truths, things that, and a lot of these in here talk about infrastructure and traffic. Traffic is not infrastructure. As I said earlier, it's a byproduct of failed infrastructure. We need to work on responsible economic development and growth and maintaining or controlling that growth, and that means talking from the state down to the municipalities, down to their folks. Even when you're talking about schools, when we build schools, schools mean roads that go into neighborhoods to get those kids to the schools. So the thing is, there needs to be a more open channel of communication back and forth between the state and the local municipalities to find better solutions. I believe it was said earlier, I've been talking about it for about a year, where we can stagger start times at work throughout in different corporations to get people on the road at different times, and that'll help immediately solve some of the issues.
Brandon Ogles.
Let's see, traffic, sales tax increases, property tax increases, building schools at a blistering pace. Those are all products of rapid growth. And I think to talk about traffic without talking about the growth that is causing the traffic is a little bit irresponsible. 22 years ago, I started traveling to Atlanta, and there's about 18 little dots around Atlanta that look very much like Franklin. And I hope as we look at what strategic growth is and managing our future, as we look at the responsible path we take and preserve Williamson County as we know it now. You know, all of the biggest problems we have as far as things that people get upset with, rezoning, moving teachers, it's a product of the growth. So we're treating symptoms of a greater problem, but it's also a blessing. So we've got to be very careful in how we handle this and look to the future. It's not just a traffic issue, it's a growth issue.
Ms. Purington, 30 seconds.
Right. So I would just say with 16 of the 20 top employers in Williamson County in our district, it will be a priority to work with private industry to figure out what flexible schedules they can arrange to reduce the traffic. And growth and the infrastructure plans that we have in place, I have high confidence that those projects are all being managed very well, that the communication is good. I think Representative Sargent did a great job with that, Sam Whitson, in working with the local community, and I would hope to model that behavior.
I get to ask a question tonight, not many of them, to Terrence Smith. Hey, Doc.
Is this going to be one of your curveballs?
This is a curveball. What do you think of medical marijuana?
Well, that's a good question. You know, we have medical marijuana now in the form of some drugs. There's drugs called Marinol and other things that we give to cancer patients to kind of enhance their appetite and put weight on, and help them through nutritional deficiencies. So we are already using marijuana. If you say, well, we're going to completely turn our back on marijuana as a plant derivative, then you're going to turn your back on a whole lot of medicines. If you're taking aspirin, guess what? It's gone, because at one point in time, those things were derivatives of plants, okay? So you cannot say we're going to completely turn our back on the use of marijuana. You do need to investigate it. I think it's certainly reasonable to look into it and see what it can do for folks with different conditions. So far, there's a lot of misinformation about it. It's really not been very helpful at all. And in the world of gastroenterology, we see a lot of people on marijuana every day with a certain thing called cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome. And we try to tell them that it's because of marijuana, but they just can't get it in their head that the marijuana is actually causing it. So it's not the panacea that everybody thinks it is. Is it something that should be studied? Of course. We do need to look at that and keep all avenues open. And in some conditions, it may well provide some benefit in certain formulations. So I would never say No, it's marijuana. We're never gonna look at this. I think that's irresponsible.
Gino Bolso, 60 seconds.
Thank you, Tom. I'm not a physician, as Dr. Smith is, of course, so I do not have the expertise that he does. But I understand the Hippocratic Oath to be that physicians are to first do no harm, second ease pain, and third cure disease. And looking at the second part, ease pain, it would seem to me that anything that God has created that can be used by the medical community to ease pain should be permissible, if in fact it's a safe, medically appropriate form of treatment. The difficulty with these bills that come up from time to time with medical marijuana is that they have less to do with patient health and patient suffering than with efforts to legalize marijuana recreationally and to provide some kind of a profit margin to individuals and businesses who are interested in profiting from the more robust sale of marijuana across the country in all different kinds of forms. So in principle, I agree wholeheartedly with Dr. Smith that if in fact you have any type of medicine that can be used to ease pain, there's no reason not to use it. But we need to be careful about these bills that come up from time to time, which frankly have a means to an end that is not at all appropriate.
Rebecca Burke.
I'm not talking about you, Bobby, this time. On recreational marijuana, I'm not in favor of that. Medical marijuana, with the opioid crisis that we have, I don't think we can turn our backs on anything that offers help in pain control and seizure control. I've signed on to a bill that is being proposed called the Trump bill, curiously enough, sponsored by Representative Faison and Senator Dickerson, that would, under tightly controlled circumstances, research further the use of medical marijuana and make it available in instances where there is strong quality control, which is certainly a concern. But I would be in favor of that.
Jeff Ford.
First, I want to be very clear. If any bill that comes forward into the state legislature when I'm up there in Nashville is a path to recreational marijuana, I will be against it. In my travels with my job, I've seen what it's done to those communities, and we do not need that here in Tennessee. So I would be 100% against that. Any bill that came forward for recreational marijuana would be totally against. As far as addressing some of the pain issues that are out there, I think it's something that we can look at. We do have to make sure that the controls are in place, that it is a non-addictive and non-hallucinogenic form, and then I would be in support of taking a look and studying those programs.
Bobby Hullett.
Thank you, sir. One of the unfortunate things about politics is that it seems to oftentimes be all about money and then, having to take jabs at your opponents and everything. But the one thing about this is that I've known Rebecca for over 10 years, and at the end of this, we'll shake hands and say something. We'll walk out. I hate it when people say it's just politics, but it is. But I hope what you're looking for is a public servant, and that's what I am. That's what I've been for the last 6 years. The one thing is I'm the furthest thing from an expert on marijuana that you can get. I've never smoked. I've never tasted alcohol. I've never done drugs. I play and coach baseball, and I love America. Woo, right? So, thank you. So the thing is, I would defer on the Hill. I would defer to the experts, and if they come to me and come to the Hill and say to all of us and say this is needed, and they show good cause and it looks like it will, of course I can support it. I'm neither for nor against. I need more information on it, and I want to learn more about it. But as most of the others have said as well, if it comes to recreational use, I'm 1,000% against that. Brandon Ogles.
I'm definitely not going to list the things I haven't done, or I'll get laughed out of here. I go to a very traditional church in Grassland. I've gone to that for 33 years. So I'm not touching this with a 10-foot pole. I'll defer to the doctors and what I've heard earlier to I guess say that if there is a form that doesn't cause addiction, doesn't cause hallucinations, doesn't cause munchies or sitting on the couch, and helps people that are sick and in pain, I can see where that's acceptable. But I'll go with everybody else and say I'm totally 100%, 1,001% against recreational use. It's devastating, and people need to get more motivated, not less.
Ms. Purington.
Between my mom, who's in the audience, and myself, I have cared for 3 family members, my brother, my father, and my husband, from cancer diagnosis through death. And that sometimes included brain tumors and fractured spine that was eaten away from cancer. And although there are medications that enhance appetite that are available, like Megace and Marinol, I think most doctors that you would ask would say that they have limited effectiveness, and that I know when I looked at the Megace pamphlet that came in the prescription, there were a list of side effects a mile long. There were moments when I considered trying to find a way to provide something that would give relief and maybe get one of my family members to be able to eat something, even if it was just small, while they were dying. And I would like to see well-researched, well-controlled products made available to cancer patients and to children who suffer from seizures, where it's been proven that it could be beneficial. I would like to see that made legal.
Dr. Smith, you got 30 more seconds if you want it.
Well, a few folks have mentioned it. A lot of times the legalization of medical marijuana is an avenue to recreational marijuana, and I am, what are we up to now, 1,100 million, bazillion % against that? Okay, anyway. But I think that marijuana, we'll see how this plays out in the future. You know, it's like the old, I grew up in Ohio, and in Ohio, when I was younger, you couldn't get Coors beer. So anytime anybody went to Colorado, they said, bring back a case of Coors beer, because you couldn't get it there, and it was so good. And now it's on every shelf, and you drink Coors beer, and it's like, well, yeah, well, what are you, what are you drinking that for? So it'll be interesting to see how states like Colorado, how the legalization of marijuana and the free use of marijuana plays out in the future.
It's time for the lightning round. On my sheet of paper here, and we're going to change the order here. This is kind of a little surprise. The lightning round answers are not to be more than 30 seconds. If you can do it in one word, bless your heart. Bo, you get the first lightning round question directed to Bobby Hullett.
All right. 2 of the top gubernatorial candidates, including one here in our backyard, have suggested changing the process by which the state attorney general is selected. Would you support having the attorney general chosen by direct election of the people, or another method, i.e. selection by the General Assembly? And would you would you be in favor of applying this to any of our other constitutional officers?
I was just going to say either yes or no, and then put the microphone down and go for the one-word answer. That is a complex question, because there's more to it than just saying yes or no. I think what needs to be looked at, and I've seen the discussions on it. I think what needs to be looked at is the ramifications down the road. We need to look at the history of how the positions have been either appointed or elected through history, and then what changing that process would do. So to be honest, right now, I would want to talk more with the leaders in the state once elected there, to find out more about what they feel, and then also talk with everybody that's in this room and find out what they feel, make sure that they are educated with it as well, and that they know what the ramifications would be.
We're going in the opposite direction. Mr. Forward.
Yes, I would be in favor of having the Attorney General elected. I don't think it should be a political appointment. I think we need an independent Attorney General that reports to the people, not to the state legislature or reports to the governor. The more elected officials, the more people we have that report to the public, the better off we are.
Rebecca Burke.
Well, we have 99 elected state representatives in our representative form of government. I would be for the representatives selecting the Attorney General, because they're accountable to us, that is the state representatives.
Mr. Bolso.
Should Tennesseans get to decide who their Attorney General is? Of course, they should get to decide that. The power in our country resides with the people. Right now, the only state officer that's elected statewide in our state is the governor. That is not acceptable. The fact that the Attorney General is selected by the Supreme Court is the result of something of an historical anomaly in our Constitution of 1870. It needs to be changed by amendment, but the Attorney General should be elected by the people.
Dr. Smith.
I agree. It's always better. I can't think of a situation where it's not better to have the people decide who their representative is going to be. And that's true for the Attorney General as well as these other positions that you're mentioning. The people should decide, and I can't imagine why we cannot trust the citizens of Tennessee to make that decision.
Ms. Purington.
I agree. I think people should elect the Attorney General. Make it simple.
Brandon Ogles.
Yes.
Kerri, deliver your question, please, to
Yes.
Jeff Ford.
Yes, I think I get 30 seconds to ask this question. It will probably take me the full 30 seconds. So it's about UGB and annexation and the state's legislature's power over that. Some residents have risen in opposition against development such as two farms, Ashcroft Valley, and most recently Mays Creek Basin in higher density, all of which were unincorporated county land. Some of those parts of the unincorporated county have faced annexation due to property owners' wishes. Would you be for changing that annexation law, and also should the state legislature change the UGB law where you have to approach the county to get permission for cities to actually develop in the UGB?
So, Kerri, that was a 30-second
30 seconds.
And UGB urban growth boundaries.
From you and a 30-second answer from me, and it's much more complex. In the UGB, people move in to that area knowing that they are at some point going to become part of the city. The city has the right to annex those when they can provide the service, and the county should work closer with them to be able to make sure that the developments in those areas are within, so that when the city comes in and annexes them in, they know what they're getting.
Ms. Burke.
My concern is this might be another area where the state gets in the way of localities making decisions that are right for them. However, I am bothered by the thought, with all due respect to Bev Berger being here representing the city of Franklin, when cities do annex areas, that the county then is obligated to provide infrastructure and schools. It seems to me there should be a lot more collaborative planning and collaborative agreement. I'd like to think that could be done without state legislation, but as a county taxpayer, it seems that we're powerless when the cities decide to do that, and it increases our costs and potentially our taxes.
Gino Bolso.
Now, Kerri, whether we're dealing with local ordinances or state statutes, when it comes to annexation and growth, our goal has to be to preserve what makes Williamson County and other areas of our state unique and desirable places to be. Williamson County is a special place. Growth is good, but we cannot allow the growth, either through annexation or other means, to destroy what made it so special in the first place. So in my view, whether we're dealing with a local ordinance or a state statute, the goal has to be to preserve what we have.
Dr. Smith.
I would echo those comments. I think we need to have the infrastructure in place to support all these extra communities and these this influx of residents. But I think that for the most part, these issues should be hashed out on a local level and not the state level.
Ms. Purington.
I would also support them being managed on the local level. I don't know if I can say enough how much I appreciate the job that has been done and how Williamson County has evolved and how it's managed. I do know that when we heard from the transportation Schroer, Mr. Schroer, he was talking about, Commissioner Schroer, thank you, that he was talking about how these plans can impact the infrastructure needs and how important it is for us to collaborate and make sure everyone is aligned with a plan that's going to work for the community.
Brandon Ogles.
Yeah, this goes back to what I said earlier, is how do we manage growth and what are we going to look like in a couple decades. There's guys that have beards and look like me, young guys right now buying up every farm inside of the 840 loop under false pretenses. And then those farms will be transferred to corporations. That's a reality. That's what's happening. And we've got to be diligent in the planning. And this is going to be a collaboration and a cooperation between, Williamson Inc., our zoning boards, and our leadership inside Williamson County and how we manage this growth. It's very important.
Dave Crouch, please direct your question, please, to... Oh, I'm sorry.
How could you forget me, Tom?
Oh.
All right.
It's you insignificant county commissioners.
That's what it is. That's what it is. So just a little thing, and this goes into with the county commission. So as an aside, to add to what it said, when an area is so dense, it pushes out and growth goes from the dense areas and there's no more room and it keeps going out and out into these areas we're talking about. Last year, 82%, a little over 82% of the building permits in our county were issued by the municipalities. Now when that happens, and over 50% of that was in Franklin alone, when that happens and schools have to be built for that, that is what causes a lot of stress, because then as a county we all have to pay for those expenses. So one of the things that, to kind of echo what everyone else here has said, those need to be local control issues, and there has to be greater means of communication between municipalities, county, and state government.
Now, Mr. Crouch, please direct your question to Rebecca Burke.
Ms. Burke, I would like to know, if elected to the State House of Representatives, which committee or committees would you like to serve on, and how do you see that as benefiting Williamson County?
Oh, that's a nice question. Thank you. I've already talked to Representative Glenn Cassida, who I hope will be our next Speaker of the House. So he will have a lot of sway in terms of recommending committees, although my understanding is that the legislators themselves do select the committees that they want to work on. I would very much like to be on healthcare and education because professionally those are my two areas of strength, and I think I can benefit the county best in those two roles. Now there are various committees and subcommittees within each of those areas, but those would be the two areas that I would move to.
Gino Bosso.
The area that's of most concern to our residents right now in District 61 and across Williamson County is traffic and the effect that it has on the daily lives of families. I want to be on the Transportation Committee.
Dr. Smith.
We have, I think we're going to have an opening on the House Ways and Means Committee in a few months. So, but that's where I think a lot of things get done, and that would be my first choice.
I would like to serve on the Transportation Committee, and I think it's because of my experience in working with large systems, large complex systems, and I can imagine working on looking at traffic flow and impacts and prioritization, much in the same way as I looked at communication systems and looking at peak communication times and when we had excess capacity. So that sort of thing fascinates me. I would also have an interest in working in the Healthcare Committee, just because of my personal experience with taking care of family members, and I think it's absolutely something that we need to improve here in Tennessee.
Brandon Ogles.
I went to my daughter's recital at TPAC last week, and I wouldn't even look up at the Capitol because I didn't want to jinx anything, and I felt dare not make plans that far ahead. I haven't given that a lot of thought. I mean, that's one of those things that I just want to get through tonight without having a panic attack, having to speak in front of a crowd. So we'll let the we'll just work hard up until August and see what happens.
Mr. Hullett.
Thank you, sir. The truth of it is, it's not the number one concern of District 61. It's the number two concern. I will give you that, and it's close. But the number one concern in District 61 is education. We have the top schools in the county here, and it affects two things: your children and your family's future, and your property values. Plain and simple. That's why it's the number one, and that's why you're looking for someone who is an education candidate. So yes, I'm working on my earning my PhD in educational leadership right now. I think I could serve the education committee quite well and be a collaborative, cooperative person on that team. And then the rest of it, I'm happy to serve where the speaker would like me to go, where he thinks that I might, or he or she thinks that I might serve the state best.
Commissioner Ford.
Thank you. First of all, I'm not going to say transportation because Williamson County delegation already has somebody on the Transportation Committee. Representative Whitson is on the Transportation Committee, and I respect his seniority and his work on that committee, so I would not want to unseat him from that. I do think with my background on the County Commission, chairing the Fiscal Planning Committee as I have, that I would be good on the Finance Committee. I'd also like to be on the State and Local Committee. We've talked a lot about local control, and that's where those issues come through. Education I'd be great on, and from my background, insurance I'd also be great on.
Bo to Bolso.
Well, this issue seems to creep up before the county commission every so often, and I want to preface very clearly for those listening, watching in the room, our friends in the media, that the Association of Realtors has not taken a stance one way or another on this issue, but it's really kind of, it's an important issue that gets brought up, and that is, would you support legislation, changing legislation that would allow for the sale of Williamson Medical Center if the funds benefited the county?
Yes, because as a conservative, I believe that when we have the private sector involved in healthcare, that is better than having a publicly operated facility. I think, unfortunately, as we've gone down this path the last few years, we've lost opportunities to have more competition in the private sector and healthcare in Williamson County. So I do believe, as a conservative, that healthcare ought to be delivered by the private sector, not the public sector.
Dr. Smith.
That's a tricky question for me because I know of this institution that was interested in buying Williamson County Medical Center. No, I agree. I think it should be, I really feel that private institutions should run the local medical centers as best as possible because it gives them the community more contact and more closeness with that medical center, and that's something, as a medical center, you need. So I would say keep it local.
Ms. Purington?
Yeah, this is something that's been discussed over and over and over again. I actually support keeping things the way they are. I think it's important for us to have the medical center here in Williamson County, and it pays for itself. It's not a burden to taxpayers, and I think it's I have a sense of pride and appreciation for the facility being here and for us to be able to be served by it. I think it provides important services, so I would not be in support of that.
Brandon Ogles.
Absolutely not for no amount of money at no time. Do I think it should be sold? 30 years ago, that was the #1 employer in Williamson County. All 4 of my children were born there, and it's been a great asset for our county and will be for many decades in the future.
Mr. Hullett.
I would echo that, and it's, being a large employer of folks here in the county. On my time, my year and a half on the county commission, we've had several votes that this kept coming up to sell it. This is the part of this type of process, the politics part of it, that I absolutely do not like, but this is a picture of the vote earlier this year where it would have started the conversation to sell the medical center. There are 5 people who voted yes, and Mr. Ford, sitting next to me, was one of those people who did vote yes. I voted no, and I would still vote no.
Mr. Ford.
First of all, that was not a vote to sell the hospital. That was a vote to study the hospital and study what we could do. When I was sitting 2 weeks ago in the CEO of Williamson Medical Center's office, Don Webb, and he gave me his full endorsement, he and I agreed that we need to take a look at the hospital, that we need great health care in Williamson County. Thank you.
Rebecca Burke.
I don't think you can ever go wrong to study options. So if I were on the county commission, I would have voted yes to study. I think the general public needs to know that we explore those options every once in a while. But beyond that, I have to tell you, in my professional background, I used to do strategic assessments of hospitals that the company I worked for was thinking of purchasing. I think the time to consider possibly selling the hospital would have been 10 years ago. I don't think it's as marketable today as it would have been then, simply because of the very close ties that have been developed with Vanderbilt University Medical Center. They are already capturing those referrals, which is a primary impetus for another hospital company to buy the hospital.
It is 7:43. We have time for one more question. Who wants to ask it?
I guess that would be me. I'd like to thank everyone for a robust debate thus far, and thank you for being here tonight. And this is my last question. Representative Charles Sargent is known for being well respected on both sides of the aisle. When he walks down the hall at the legislature, he is known as Mr. Chairman. Both parties, Republicans and Democrats, rush up to shake his hand, and you hear Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, as he walks through the halls. So he has built a very respectable reputation with the legislature. And he is known for bringing both parties together during conversations. So my question is, what would your leadership style be in the House with almost a third of senior legislators like Charles Sargent not seeking re-election?
I think Dr. Smith gets it first.
Well, my leadership style, I think, would be to realize, first and foremost, that I'm a freshman representative. You're going to hear a lot of promises from a lot of people, and that stack of cards that somebody held up kind of alludes to that. I mean, everybody's talking about, I'm going to walk in there on the first day and I'm going to repeal this, and I'm going to veto that, and I'm going to throw this law out, and I'm going to do this and that and the other thing. You know, those are promises you're not going to be able to keep. So you have to be realistic, and I think we talked about this a week ago, that I operate on a field of realism, and that's not just not realistic to walk in there and tell people on the first day that you're going to take over.
Ms. Purington.
Well, I can tell you from working in aerospace and defense and intelligence that I'm used to working with a lot of Republicans and getting amazing things done. And one thing that I think is missing in our legislature is a mission orientation and people really being focused on what needs to be accomplished. That's how I work. That's how my brain works. I think problem solving is in my DNA. Collaboration is in my DNA. And I would relish the opportunity to work with anyone that has similar underlying interests.
Brandon Ogles.
I think first you have to realize that the divide at the state level is not so much even Democrat versus Republican, it's rural versus urban. So I think you have to realize that and be willing to work with some of the areas of the state that are much ruraler. But you also have to be respectful across the aisle to Democrats and work together and actually spend a majority of your time lifting people up rather than tearing them down.
Bobby Hullett.
Thank you, sir. The first thing I would say is nothing. I think you have to be an exceptional leader or an exceptional listener to be an exceptional leader. And so I would listen, and then once getting the thoughts and opinions from those already there, then I would say, how can I help? Here are my strengths, here are my areas of growth, how can I help? But the first thing you have to do when you come in is you have to listen, and then you have to approach with a collaborative and cooperative spirit, just like I've been saying the entire night, to make sure that we can work across the aisle. It shouldn't be just us versus them. That mentality has gotten us nowhere over years and years and years. We have to be collaborative and cooperative and work together to make our state, communities, and county better.
Jeff Ford.
One of the things that I've been most proud of in this campaign is that I've gotten campaign contributions from people on the county commission as diverse as Kathy Danner and Betsy Hester and Tommy Little. If you know anything about those personalities, you know that they are as far apart as anyone that you're going to find at the legislature. I think that proves to my ability and my style to be able to get along and work with people on every side of the aisle. It's not just both, it's every side of the aisle.
Rebecca Burke.
I have the advantage here of having served nearly 4 years on the state executive committee. 4 years ago, you elected me to represent Williamson County on the state Republican Party board of directors. And that means I work with 66 colleagues from all over the state, and they are what I call all flavors of Republicans, from the most moderate to the most conservative. And yet I've been tapped several times to lead debate at the SEC level. And you get to that point because people trust you, your honesty, your integrity. When you speak about statistics and facts, you know your stuff, and they know that you won't lead them astray. Reaching across the aisle, we can do. If we reform Medicaid, we'll have Democrats and Republicans working together to improve health care delivery in the state of Tennessee.
Mr. Bolso.
Kerri, I think the most important leadership quality is humility. But you have to understand, as Howard Baker used to say, that the other guy might be right. And one thing that I found in the practice of law for 32 years, especially trying cases to juries, is that jurors believe most what they conclude themselves. So as a leader, you don't go dictating to individuals what they should conclude. You, in a humble way, present facts to them and then persuade them to a particular conclusion that might be the one that is in the best interest of the people. That would be my leadership style.
It's time for our closing remarks. 30 seconds for each of you. And we'll begin with Ms. Purington.
All right, well, thank you again for holding this forum tonight, and enjoyed this very much, and learning more about my colleagues even. I'm a problem solver. That's what I've done. Like I mentioned before, I worked on large, complex issues, working with people of all different kinds, creating systems for nations to communicate, all the way down to working with a local law enforcement, learning to talk, or creating systems to talk better with the fire department. So I would love the opportunity to take those skills and that mindset to the state legislature, a problem solver's heart. So I would appreciate your vote in November.
Brandon Ogles.
I just want to say it's been a pleasure to be here tonight, as much as I thought it would not be, because this is scary to me. But I've loved growing up in this community. I feel blessed to have been able to be raised here, and I just want to ensure that this is a great community in the future. It's a great place to live, and it'll continue to be. And I'm just very thankful to have this opportunity to sit up here tonight with these great folks, and I'd appreciate your support in 61. Thank you.
Bobby Hullett.
Thank you, sir. In 2012, I was elected to the school board, and in 2014 to 2016, we went through 2 very difficult years on the school board, and I told everybody that it was basically a second and third full-time job for me. And only when I felt that the school board was in a good place was I able to accept the nomination and the appointment to the county commission to move on. I have always worked for the residents of this county. I've lived in District 61 since 1980 when my family moved here right before I started 4th grade. I will serve you, your families, your children, our community, our county, and our state if you send me to the Hill.
Mr. Ford.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've got an important decision. Coming on August 2nd, one of the 6 of us will be elected as your Republican representative for the State House of Representatives District 61 to replace Charles Sargent. None of us can fill his shoes, but one of us is going to be in that chair. I've proven that I'm a good legislator. I know how to do the job. I've been serving you. You know what you're getting. You don't have to take a chance. I ask for your vote on August the 2nd. Thank you.
Rebecca Burke.
58 years ago, a little girl started kindergarten, and her daddy said, "You can be anything you want to be as long as you work harder than anyone else." If there's anything that I've developed a reputation for through healthcare, education, and spending 30 years in politics helping others, it's that I will outwork anyone. And that's what I would like to do for you, to work very hard to protect this little piece of heaven that we have here called Williamson County, but in so doing also further the success of the entire state of Tennessee. I'd appreciate the honor of your vote.
Gino Bolso.
In just a few weeks, ladies and gentlemen, you will have a very important decision to make. And the question is, how do you decide between and among the candidates up here which one to vote for? And let me just suggest a framework. Who is it that most embodies the values that you hold dear? Who is it that will, as a conservative, make sure that we have limited government, low taxes, and we have a robust economy in Tennessee, and especially in Williamson County, that will provide jobs for families and will allow us to go ahead and meet the challenges of tomorrow? If you look at our website, betterwithbolso.com, I hope you will conclude that I share your values and should be your choice.
Terrence Smith.
Well, I agree. With this many candidates, you do need some kind of framework to make your selection, and that framework is what I mentioned earlier. It's a connection between that one individual who has a background that is most like yours. I'm a soldier. I've been in the infantry, the cavalry, the aviation section, the military police section. I've worked in a factory as a welder. I've been in retail sales. I've been a physician. I've been a state trooper. It's just an odd background. I'm sorry. but I can guarantee if we had dinner together, we'd have something to talk about. The other things, trust, honesty. I'm not going to tell you things that I can't deliver on. And finally, commitment to service.
There are 161 people in the room tonight. Early voting begins on Friday. Yes, it's Friday the 13th. So make your plans to vote. And no, we're not in Memphis or Chicago. Don't vote often, so vote early. We thank you for coming here tonight. There's one more of these coming up, and it should be a doozy. Ready?
Hi there. Tom promised that we'd be out by 8 o'clock, so I'm going to help him make good on that promise. But my husband had to slip out to pick out our son, so on behalf of Derby and I and the Williamson Herald, I just want to thank our partners and our sponsors in helping make this debate possible tonight. Williamson, Inc., Matt and Kell, Williamson County Association of Realtors, Bo Patton and his team, and my dear friend Tom Lawrence from WAKM Radio 950. I'd also like to thank our moderators tonight, Dave Crouch and our own Kerri Bartlett, our managing editor. They've put a lot of hard work into this debate tonight, and I really appreciate their help. I want to also thank the candidates tonight, each and every one of them, for being here, for your hard work, for your time, and for your willingness to serve. I appreciate those of you in the community that came out tonight just to be informed and learn more about these candidates. And I have no doubt in my mind that those of you in this room will get out and vote, but please grab a friend, grab a family member, make sure that you get out there to the polls and vote. This election is very important. So thank you very much. My name's Cassie Jones, and we just appreciate you all being here tonight.